An Astralis report surfacing last week, guys, has many people worried about that report, what it said inside. If you guys did not know, earnings before tax, depreciation, interest, amortization for the group just this past year in 2019, equating to a negative 22.7 million Danish krone. If you guys do not know, also equivalent to around 3.5 million US dollars. People very worried about that, not even including the losses from 2018 and 2017. Am I concerned? Am I worried? Well, I'm a human, guys. Outside looking in, probably not the best of statistics to actually look at, but if you're worried about Astralis, you probably should be worried about a ton of other esports organizations as well, which I'm going to be kind of honest with all of you. I'll be positive about this. I think coronavirus, all the things happening in esports right now is certainly a detriment and going to be affecting these organizations and these organizers and these games all the more. I hope we can survive past it. I currently am not worried about a newly established group, that being Astralis. Also, by the way, they have so much when it looks at their financials when it comes time for expenses. I do hope they can recoup it in the future, but obviously there's a reason as to why they're operating at this loss currently, and it's probably comparable to the likes of many esports organizations. When I come to looking at their expenses, though, we've already talked about how much they pay their players. They have 3 established teams: Origin and LEC for League of Legends, Astralis for CSGO, one of the most dominant CSGO teams we will ever see in the esport, and then a FIFA team known as the Future, who I'm not really going to be talking about too much about this. When it comes time to the salaries they pay out, over $4 million this coming year will be paid out for player salaries across those 3 teams. That is amongst the most that other esports, amongst all esports organizations to pay. They pay their players, especially probably their CSGO guys, very, very well. And so you look at that alongside their LEC payment, their gigantic loan to League of Legends, any franchise fee is going to be very, very expensive. It does make sense why they're operating at a loss. When you also look at the earnings being negative for the CSGO roster, of course, the LEC team, they are pretty in the negative when it looks at that. Obviously enough, it's pretty ironic as well when it comes time for earnings. Only the FIFA team seems to be at least a little bit in the positive as compared to their other 2 teams. I will give you guys this after looking over other things. The only 2 things that I really see concerns about, you guys of course can share yours down below, is actually the amount of money they pay back in prize pools to their players. As many of us know, when it comes time for revenue for organizations, prize pools is typically not a gigantic one, although it looks like it on the stat sheet. Yes, a lot of that's going right back to the players. Astralis making a gigantic portion of the revenue from those prize pools, probably from Counter-Strike, because the Astralis team has made so much from that, and probably what, 75 to 80% of that money made is going right back to the players, not to the organization. So we'll see if that changes in the future. We all know Counter-Strike players and a lot of esports players out there are paid very well salary-wise. Will organizations eventually start taking from the prize pools or maybe lower the salaries to try and offset something? Maybe. We're right now in a very, very high point for salaries and what players are actually earning at the top level. It's not a real big shocker to all of you guys watching. On top of that, what does concern me, but also a double-edged sword, is the amount of sponsorship revenue that Astralis is making is excessively high. Over 50% of their current revenue is actually from sponsors. I say double-edged sword because, yes, that's tremendous. The fact that Astralis is this well known, they can bring in that much money from very, very top-notch sponsors is impressive. It's a bit concerning, though, if one of those sponsors does fall off, or if Astralis and their performance falls off and Astralis has a sponsor back out, all of a sudden a huge chunk of your revenue is just gone, right? The only thing we can really compare this to, not many esports organizations are actually public with their financials. We talked about months ago, Luminosity Gaming, one of the few profitable esports organizations, at least in some years out there. Right now, currently, what they made this past year from sponsors, I do believe, or at least it was in 2018, 5% of their revenue was from sponsorships back in 2018. Astralis this past year, 54% of their revenue was from sponsorships. That's pretty crazy. Luminosity Gaming in their peak, when they actually had the eventual MIBR CSGO roster, one of the most dominant Brazilian rosters probably in the history of CSGO back in 2016, their sponsorship revenue that year was upwards of 25%, the highest it had ever been. So it goes to show you both how impressive it is that Astralis can bring in these sponsors, but yeah, a bit concerning if one of them, like Audi, all of a sudden backs out, right? Either way, though, if you're going to worry about Astralis, you got to worry about a lot of organizations out there. The first thing that comes to mind is Optic Gaming was bought by Immortals Gaming Club for what was reported as $100 million. How do you recoup that? All right, if you're going to worry about Astralis, worry about the Brazilians as well. All right, So overall, TLDR for all of you guys, am I worried about Astralis this past year operating at a $3.5 million loss? No, and I'm not too shocked by it either, especially when it comes time for an LEC payment. Huge for League of Legends. Also paying out those $4+ million in salaries across those 3 teams, paying their players very well. On top of that, giving a far majority of a large portion of their revenue, that being the prize pools, especially the Astralis guys have earned, right back to the players. I'm kind of surprised they're not losing a bit more with this. On top of it as well, of course, the reason why they opened that stock being to try and pay off that LEC payment. Now, I'm not going to go out and recommend you guys invest heavily into Astralis based off this, but am I worried for their prolonged future? I choose, as of right now, not to be. Certainly a few things in these financials are got to be a little bit worrisome, maybe concerning, but the other side of things, when you compare this to a lot of other esports organizations, the things that Astralis have done, the moves that Astralis have made are certainly very impressive. So if you are worried about Astralis, you definitely have to be worried about a lot of other esports organizations as well. And if you want to take that side, I really can't blame you, especially as of right now, kind of a secondary story out there, what coronavirus is doing to the entire esports scene. It's crippling markets, it's crippling the scene entirely, and people aren't really, people are paying attention to it, but whenever I talk about it on here, people don't care too much. We have now seen dozens of esports events and some gigantic LAN events either canceled, delayed, postponed, whatever it might be, guys, being affected tremendously. And esports heading to 2020 in the future, we were already in the bubble, right? This could not be a worse time to hit this bubble. The coronavirus, of course, now Astralis. The markets are also crippling themselves, and Astralis has a stock to try and keep up their price with. It's a very, very troublesome time, not only for organizations, but tournament organizers and esports entirely. And so I'm going to try my best to be positive about it, but certainly I am worried about the future. We will see what esports organizations can bounce back, last it out, and along with them, what esports can also survive alongside the tournament organizers as well. But as per usual, I will be here breaking down the esports and gaming news, whether bad or good, for all of you guys. Until next time, take care. Lastly, are you guys worried about Astralis financials?